Well, as a New South Wales senator, Pete, I can quite happily comment about things in Victoria, but I won't. I'll leave that up to Michael O'Brien to do. But if you look at the facts are pretty stark at the moment. The facts would indicate that from day one, there were people available and that the other states used them to great effect. And I think the issue, when I was looking at it this morning, I think the Premier of New South Wales did say that there was no support on offer and that was never offered. I'm not quoting verbatim his words. But the Minister has made it quite clear that the ADF had made multiple offers on this. And this is the kind of detail that occurs in all of these issues. And I go back to the basic facts that, to me, with my experience, I would say that you can use the ministerial setups in a state or a nation to handle routine activities. I think that if you're going to handle something like COVID-19 in a state the way it's gone in Victoria, you may need to move away from the normal routine methods of a Premier speaking to ministers through committees, etc. And we saw this in the Rudd-Gillard-Rudd government trying to control the borders and stop the boats. And we had a lot longer to look at it as they stuffed it up time and time again when we were in opposition. But the real measure of leadership is to pick the ability, to pick the point at which you move from routine ministerial activities based on committees, etc., to a specific activity where you take one person, put them in charge, give them the resources and the authority and say, if you don't do this well, we'll sack you. And that then releases the Premier to continue to run the state, to have under him the way Morrison had General Angus Campbell under him, to run the state, to be sitting one back and to be able to monitor all of this and not get mixed up in the appalling detail that's gone on in this case.
As a former military man, were you left scratching your head as to why Defence Force personnel weren't taken up? I mean, it's plainly obvious, isn't it, that it would be a significant help?
I am surprised, and I remember seeing, and it was at a later date, I remember seeing, I think about the 24th of June, I remember seeing the request that came back or the statement that was made that the Department of Health and Human Services in Victoria had made a request for 850, and I thought, oh, that's good. That's the way it should go. We should take the opportunity of this for the Victorians. And two of my kids are down there, stuck in the middle of this, and my family is down there. I come from Victoria originally. I remember seeing that and thinking, well, that's good. Things will move ahead now that you've got 850 ADF personnel on the road. But I was astonished that within a day it was turned off. And I heard a lot of speculation as to why it was turned off, and only an inquiry will find out whether that was true. Mate, I was astonished.
Just want to get your thoughts on this defence report too, Jim, that's coming out in due course. Linda Reynolds has said this week that it's going to be uncomfortable reading for those who do come across it. It's in relation to alleged war crimes, and there's been a lot of reporting over that over the last months now. What are you expecting?
Well, I'm expecting a very, very good report because it's taken so long, and those that are conducting it I have known in the past and were very, very competent. So I think we'll see a good report. I think one thing that a lot of people miss is that this is not a report about actions in the heat of battle. It's a report about things that happened outside the heat of battle when sometimes it's very hard to draw a line. And I won't comment on it in particular, but I go back to my experience in Iraq, and every single time we had a soldier who overstepped the laws of armed conflict or who stepped outside what I would consider to be my moral framework for activities in a war situation, they were reported by their mates. And it came from the lowest level of in fact, all of them were American soldiers in that instance. It came from the morality that those American soldiers had, who saw that appalling things were being done, and they were the ones who came to the generals and said, listen, you've got to do something about that. Now, I won't comment on the report, but,
Sure.
our countries have very strong moral bases.
I mean, I've read a little bit on it in recent days, or the reporting that's come out by Ben Packham anyway, and, there's a lot of questions about who has to take the blame for all of this. There's suggestion that troops were tired, they were sent to too many missions. And this all, dovetails into the argument about what happens in the fog of war. But when it comes to responsibility, I mean, does that extend from the soldier to superiors and to even politicians who sent them there in the first place?
Well, I'm on the record for a long, long time as that war went on for advocating that we put in a larger balanced force. My fear at the time was that the special forces were being overused, and that we needed to, and that they were being used for essentially things which standard infantry could do, leaving the special forces for a lesser of involvement, but to do what they do best. Now, I make no accusations, but governments must understand that if you're going to commit to a war, you've got to be very, very careful about what forces you use, and governments must be deeply involved in the decisions about what forces are used. I think we did. I think we will find out, quite possibly we will find out, that we overused our special forces. And I'm not saying that's what caused these things, but we've overused our special forces, and as a principle, if you're going to be involved in a war, it's exactly the point I was making in relation to Victoria. If you're going to be involved in a war, you take specific responsibility for a province or an area or a function. You own that function and you staff that function, and you go in to achieve a result.
OK, just finally, Jim, how much would you have liked to have had Teddy Sheehan in your group?
Yes. Can you imagine the number of acts of heroism in the Second World War where something like 60 to 80 million people died that have been unreported and unrecognised and unrewarded? What a fabulous young soldier. And we generals always depend on soldiers who are prepared to stand up and fight to achieve what governments and nations want to achieve. What a fine young man.
It took his family a long time to get this approved. I mean, do you think this may open the door to other requests?
There'd be one or two others that I would seriously look at, but that can always be controlled. And the issue is, did the individual deserve the highest honour? And if the individual deserved the highest honour, then one by one, in each particular case, they should be looked at.